Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fata. June is National Homeownership Month, a time to celebrate the benefits that home ownership brings to families, neighborhoods, and communities across America. I thought a great topic to discuss during Home Ownership Month would be housing counseling. Housing counseling is one of the many services that a nonprofit credit counseling company offers, and we offer housing counseling here at Navicore Solutions. Our housing counseling education services include default foreclosure prevention counseling, prepurchase housing counseling, reverse mortgage counseling, rental housing counseling, and housing literacy and counseling workshops. You'll hear a more in-depth conversation of some of these services in the interview today. And today, I'll be joined by Stacie Rillo. Stacie is a certified housing counselor at Navicore Solutions, and she's been a part of the Navicore family for 14 years. Stacie and I will discuss why you should consult with a housing counselor, strategies you can use to save for a down payment, options you have if you're late with your mortgage, and much more. Now, let's get to my interview with Stacie. Hi, Stacie. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for having me. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So June is Home Ownership Month. So I thought this month's episode would be a great time to discuss housing counseling because we haven't done so on the podcast yet. So I guess to get started, can you just let the listeners know what is housing counseling?
Yes, absolutely. Housing counseling is financial education and resources to help a consumer navigate one's housing needs, whether it is a rental, whether it is home ownership. We do have the ability to provide quite a bit of information and resources so that the consumer can make an informed decision and hopefully have that path to help them navigate, some direction with their next steps, essentially.
Are there any eligibility requirements for housing counseling?
No, it's just, I guess, really being engaged, wanting to learn. It really does not matter when somebody reaches out to a housing counselor. Sometimes people reach out and they don't even know what housing counseling is. They really don't even know why they were referred to us. And then, we have the ability, of course, to explain that, but more importantly, to just be another financial and really nonprofit resource educator so that they can understand what it takes to obtain housing. Again, whether it's subsidized rental housing, whether it's your traditional rental like market rent, whether it's low income, affordable housing. So there's all different types of areas of housing that we're certified to discuss. And really, the eligibility requirement is to just be engaged and be willing to learn.
Yeah, so no income requirement or anything. It's just anybody is available.
Yeah, and it just, again, depending on the housing program that they might be inquiring about, yes, there could be an income requirement but for the counseling itself, absolutely not. You can make very little, low to moderate income. I can speak to clients that are a very high income, level status. So it really just is there for everybody, this resource, housing counseling.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when would you suggest that people consider housing counseling?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that whenever they're ready to become a renter or own a home, or even if they're just thinking about it. So again, it goes back to they don't necessarily have to be ready. They might not know what it takes to be ready. So I think really whenever one is thinking about this, I talk to some clients of ours that, they're still living at home with family and they're just trying to figure out, what they or where they need to be rather within the next 5 years, let's say. So there's really no specific timeline. It's just a matter of the person's need at that point or the person's goal and they might reach out to us to help them support that goal. That's really
Yeah.
what housing counseling is all about, to have like that extra support, that extra helping hand.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of millennials could use that advice because a lot of them still are living at home and then, they might want to be making the next steps. So I think it would be a great resource for them and that they might not even know about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, right now we have, rental counseling available, pre-purchase counseling available, all different types of housing
Mm-hmm.
counseling, but absolutely those would probably be the majority of the calls that
Mm-hmm.
I primarily
Oh,
handle.
okay.
Um, we do work different programs here, being team members, but
Right.
absolutely, we have the ability to guide anybody, even if they don't even know what they want.
Right.
Some people call and say, hey, Stacie, I was given your number because I was told that, you could help me with my credit. I'll just
Mm-hmm.
use an example on that.
Right.
That might be like the beginning of the conversation. But throughout, conversing with somebody, I might identify, wow, actually, there's a little bit more to just improving their credit. The goal to improving credit is to buy a car. I'm just, again, using a story, okay?
Right.
Because I'm certified on different topics, or
Right.
buying a house, or renting a house, or renting an apartment. So we need credit for many things nowadays. So sometimes somebody might call me for one thing, but then we go in the direction of that housing counseling, whether it be rental or home buying.
Right. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but why should someone work with a housing counselor? Like, what are the benefits of it?
Well, the benefits are we're counselor for life.
Mm-hmm.
So the support is ongoing.
Right.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
like we just have to have one consultation and then that's it. So we do provide
Oh,
ongoing support. And I really think it just comes down to having another professional opinion, another key player in your toolbox. I do refer to myself as a tool in your toolbox. So I do get a chuckle out of that every now and again. But absolutely, we're just one of the key players, just like your realtor is, just like maybe your attorney is if you're purchasing a home and you're using an attorney, the loan officer, the bank, we're just another key player of that whole area, that whole um, business, really. We're all a part of it. And I think it's becoming more and more popular nowadays because it's not a bad thing to talk to a counselor. When I give presentations, I always say, don't let my title confuse you.
mm-hmm.
I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to, help you visualize kind of where you are now and where you might need to be and how to get there. I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong or that you shouldn't have a Netflix account, so my job is, again, to do my best to just help paint a picture. So I think that's really a key benefit because we can visualize whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I really try to keep the conversation really organic because it can be very personal to discuss, our credit, our finances. Maybe some of us have fallen on hard times. Maybe some of us have excessive debt. But there's never any judgment coming from a housing counselor. We realize we do certain things to survive, or we learn from certain, experiences or actions that we take. And we're just here, again, to hopefully help that navigation, whether it be into rentership, if that's a word, or
Mm-hmm.
homeownership.
Yeah.
Um, really, that's really, I think, a huge benefit. Just having another voice, having another ear. You're going to have a lot of opinions and professionals through this whole process. So it's just somebody else weighing in.
Yeah. I like how you kind of said there are a lot of people, different tools when you're buying a house, but they might not know you. Like your real estate agent might not know everything that you've been through, but you can open up to a housing counselor about your different financial situations in life. So I think it is another great opinion to have.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And like I said, we're here to provide support. There's never any judgment.
Yeah.
Our job is to, do our best to just really help somebody succeed. That's what it's all about. Whatever they're trying to succeed on when it comes to their housing goals. And we want to make sure that we're not only preparing them with the financial education, the resources, and the tools that, some people have very much instilled on their own before even calling us in most cases. Many
Right.
clients are very, very proactive with already instilling money management techniques, credit management techniques, budget management techniques. And sometimes it's just really great to get that reassurance. Like, I talk
Yeah.
to clients that have just been, really doing their research, really digging in, and I'm just kind of another part of that digging, right?
Right.
So they, use me as a resource too. Excellent. And I just, commend them really. And I'm just giving them that reassurance and letting them know that, hey, wow, according to what you're sharing with me, it looks like you're on the right path. Or even for that client that might be making a credit comeback or establishing credit. Some of them do a lot of research before calling me and they say, hey, this is what we're already working on. And I say, great, keep moving in that direction. So sometimes the conversation goes that way too. And then the person's like, wow, I'm really happy I took the time to speak with you because you just basically reconfirmed what I needed to hear. Like, I thought so, but now this makes me feel better,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I love that you said that, the reassurance, because a lot of people do need that. I personally have a hard time making decisions, so I always need reassurance. So I feel like that's a great to have a person that can reassure you
Yeah,
in the
definitely.
process. So how can someone go about finding a housing counselor?
Well, you could go to www.navicoresolutions.org, but
Yeah.
one of the main resources is www.hud.gov. So that's
Yeah.
HUD.gov.
Yeah.
And that's because we're HUD accredited. So we're going
Yeah.
to be listed as a nonprofit,
Hmm.
agency on that website. We're affiliated with
Right.
many other partnerships as well that,
Totally.
you can find us out there. But that would be one of the main resources that people find us, or they find us on like njhousing.gov, which
Hmm.
is the New Jersey Mortgage Housing and Finance Agency's website.
Hmm.
So a lot of times we'll get, calls from there like, oh, the state referred us to call you.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's also important to stress that you should go through an approved nonprofit agency, because there are just so many sketchy places out there that don't have your best interest at heart. So you want to make sure you are going through HUD. So I'm definitely going to put the link to HUD in the description of this podcast so people can get it there. So I guess,
Absolutely.
yeah. So what documents should someone have prepared when they're first meeting with a housing counselor?
Well, really, we want to go through a list of any reoccurring expenses, whether they're monthly, quarterly, annually, like Amazon bills are annually. I break everything down monthly as a counselor.
Okay.
So we would go through a monthly budget of expenses and we would talk about any income if applicable.
Mm.
And then we will visualize. And then what we do from there, after going through, essentially you'd have like an introduction to the call, you would talk about the person's goal, maybe the actions that they might have already taken. We would already do a soft credit review by then, go through some credit education, and then we would do the budget analysis. So that would be the purpose of having that information prepared so that
Mhm.
we can then outline an action plan. And I say we because it's me and the client, or the
Right.
clients, right?
Mhm.
That consumer that's looking for information. So the purpose of doing the budget is so that we're visualizing based on what the situation looks like now. And we can always do a projection because numbers are not set in stone. But the purpose of doing the now budget is so we know what that person has to work with. So that when we're making recommendations, whether it be credit related, whether it be housing or savings related, it makes sense. And for the
Right.
person that might be looking into homeownership, let's say, well, then they're going to want to have their gross wages available. Renters can also have their gross wages available as well. So the gross and the net income is very helpful because when you're going for an apartment, a lot of times they only look at the gross wages and the credit. When you're going for a mortgage, they always look at the gross wages, but we see our net wages to pay our bills. So, again, a budget and gross and net income is what the client would have to prepare for the call.
Right. So after they prepare those two things, what questions could they have prepared to ask the housing counselor when they first meet with them?
Well, it's really whatever they're trying to accomplish.
Right.
Typically, I would say, we more so talk about that at the latter part of the call. But if
Okay.
anybody has questions in the beginning, we absolutely address those. Um, it's just going to depend on what they're trying to accomplish, what
Right.
questions they might have. Some people don't even have questions. They'll say, "I don't know," until we get
Mhm.
to talking,
Right.
and that's okay too.
Yeah, definitely. So, we kind of touched on this. I think we mentioned it for like a second earlier, but what is pre-purchase housing counseling?
Sure. So pre-purchase housing counseling is something that is either going to prepare somebody that is preparing to buy a home, whether it be
Hmm.
now or in the future,
Okay.
or something that is required because the person is already under contract on a home and the investor, whether it be like Fannie Mae or FHA, that's like an investor of a
Uh-huh.
mortgage, they might require the pre-purchase counseling.
Okay.
So the conversation for pre-purchase counseling is absolutely tailored to fulfill the certificate that we have to provide. All
Hmm.
right. And there is no expiration date on the certificate, but typically lenders like to see it dated within a year.
Okay.
But there is certain topics we do have to touch on to fulfill that pre-purchase education and that certificate. So again, somebody might obtain that um, not ready at all, when it comes to that
Hmm.
type of counseling, meaning they're just trying to prepare for down the road, or somebody might be required to take the counseling because they're under contract on a home and that's what the mortgage investor requires.
Got it. Okay, that's
And
good
you
to
could have
know.
excellent credit, excellent income, and still be required to go
Right.
through counseling.
Right. That's
Yes.
a good point to make.
Yeah.
So, how early in the home buying process should someone seek the help of a housing counselor? Should they do it before they even consider buying or after they put in an offer? Like, when should they do that?
I think before they consider buying, so that
Okay.
this way they understand that just because the mortgage company qualifies us for something doesn't necessarily mean we can afford it.
Right.
If I went out and charged up all my credit cards tomorrow, I could tell you I'd be in big trouble next month unless I'm
Yeah.
making more of an income.
Right.
So, as a housing counselor, we really help identify those other areas that the bank doesn't look at. And we really talk about lifestyle. We talk about, what are we willing to sacrifice? What are we not willing to sacrifice? Because the bank will qualify you one way, but we
Hmm.
will live another way. So that, I guess, goes back to too another great benefit of talking to a housing counselor. Because sometimes like people think like, oh, my mortgage company, they're taking my utilities into consideration. No, they're
Mm.
not. They're
Oh,
taking my
okay.
cell phone bill into consideration. No, they're not.
Right.
They're taking my car insurance into consideration. No, they're
No.
not. Yes, they're using an automatic calculation,
Right.
assuming you have enough money to pay all those bills. But that's not always the case. I could tell you if I maxed out on my buying power, I would be house poor every month. I wouldn't have
Wow.
extra money for home maintenance. I wouldn't have extra money for my, future retirement that I'm saving for. I wouldn't have just emergency money. I wouldn't have disposable income if I maxed out on my buying power.
Right.
I knew that I was in a position that I may not get a huge pay raise, in the
Hmm.
near future. So I had to make sure that I was buying below my means so that I can still maintain my lifestyle. Now,
Right.
I do not live an extravagant life, okay? But I do like to do certain things, garden, go to Disney once a year. Okay. And I know, again, this might not be a need, and more so housing counseling is probably focused more so on the needs. But we
Hmm.
talk about those wants because they're real, right?
Right. Right. No,
I mean, we
right.
work hard for our money. I
100
certainly don't want to just work to pay the bills. I don't know about you, but
100%.
that's not my goal in life.
Yeah, that is such a great point to bring up because you don't want to be house poor, as you said.
No. And
So,
many people go into it for
right.
whatever reasons. Everybody's got a reason, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but my job is to just kind of shine that light so that somebody can say, wow, I never thought of that before, but I'm still going to do it anyway, Stacie. Or, you bring up a good point. I've had so many clients say to me, wow, you brought up such a good point. I never thought of it that way. Every time I talk about it in this manner.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to even get that consistent feedback from multiple clients, you know what I mean, who have totally different situations, totally different income brackets, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people don't take their other bills into account, or even savings. Like, you want to make sure you could still save for your retirement and your emergency fund while you still have to pay your mortgage. There's a lot of other things to factor in.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
definitely a good point to bring up. So I guess when we're talking about saving, what strategies can somebody use for saving for a down payment on a house?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to depend on
Right.
resources and time. That's my answer to everybody on that. So it's just, that's why that budget is so important, so that we can create, okay, well, how long would it take you to save $10,000 if there's a $10,000 down payment assistance program that you might be eligible for at that time, and your situation, your budget stays the same for the next 5 years. How long will it take you to get that 10,000? Some people have money that would be gifted to them from family members that can be used. Some people have inheritance. Some people have settlement money. I mean, there's all different kinds of resources outside of our regular savings that the bank will consider. But absolutely, if we're just talking about how long does it take, it's going to depend on the purchase of the home and the resources that that person has, and the time meaning, well, how are those resources going to work within that year's time or in that 5-year time? If the budget stayed the same in a perfect world, because a budget is not always perfect either.
Yeah. So I guess it depends if you want to make, cuts to your life. Do you just want to stop going out to dinner all the time and put that money towards savings? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
So,
Good point. So how bad do you want it?
exactly.
Right. So
Exactly.
clients will say to me, well, how long do you think this is going to take me, Stacie? Like they like put it back on me, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, I appreciate your faith in me. I do. But it's going to depend on your time, your resources, and how bad you want it. Those are like my famous sayings.
Yeah.
I mean, money is huge. Somebody that has a $300 surplus, it's going to take them a lot longer than somebody with $1,000 surplus every month. If that's how it stayed. And if they're buying, a home that's in a certain price range. I mean, the lesser the home, the less you have to save.
Right. It's going to be different for every person. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you need at least 3.5% as a down payment for your FHA product. As a down payment of the purchase price, 3.5%. And then in New Jersey, an average closing costs are 4% of the purchase price. So I always use a blank example. Like, think of it as you need 8% of the purchase price to get the deal done. It's like a nice round figure. In best case scenario, you got a couple grand left over. Okay. And that's if no down payment assistance is available, like no first time home buyer program or grant. So that's the example I use. So, 8% of 100,000, we're buying a really small, townhome somewhere in like super Southwest Jersey.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know where.
So if we're talking about, really inexpensive purchase, then yeah, $100,000 home, you could probably get in for $8,000, with your money. But higher the home purchase, more closing costs. Seller has closing costs just like the buyer. Seller pays for both the realtors and other fees to close. So these are things too that the housing counselor educates the consumer on, the client on.
That's some good information there. So I want to touch on another counseling we do. What is reverse mortgage counseling?
So the one particular product, which is the home equity conversion mortgage, because there are different types of equity products that are out there right now. Okay. But the home equity conversion mortgage, that is backed by the FHA. So that's a federally backed product. So that is for homeowners that are 62 years of age or older. And it allows them to use the equity of their home and not have a forward mortgage anymore. So essentially, they're taking out the reverse mortgage to pay off any existing mortgage if applicable. But if there's no mortgage, okay, they're just using the equity of the home kind of like as cash. Okay, so there's different options to that. And it is 462 plus for the home equity conversion mortgage, because that's one specific equity product, okay, for, we'll say, seniors, all right? And that particular product is a totally different counseling, totally different certification when it comes to being, certified to discuss that program. Right. But it is a way for one to use home equity and live in the home forever.
Got it. Okay.
But they still have to keep up with the taxes of the home. They still have to pay the homeowner's insurance, and they still have to keep up with the home. Like, they can't have like the roof caving in. Like, that could call the loan due, and it can cause it to go into default. I mean, home equity conversion mortgage, it can be a little complicated to explain, so I don't want to get into too much detail on it. Yeah, no just because it can be a very different program outside of your traditional, home buying and things like that. Yeah.
So I guess kind of to keep on the mortgage topic, what options are available if you're late with your mortgage?
So we have foreclosure prevention counseling here. Absolutely. We are nationally certified. And we would walk the client through that in being able to understand the realistic options with working with a mortgage company or their state or at a local community level. That's, again, the benefit of talking to a housing counselor, because there are so many scam companies out there. But mortgage servicing companies are the only ones that can typically offer mortgage assistance, meaning if I pay my loan to Bank of America is the only one that can help me based on my investor guidelines outside of maybe my state or my local community programs. But there are for-profit companies out there right now charging fees for modifications, which they should not be doing. So you can get the free advice from a housing counselor for foreclosure prevention options or alternative solutions to foreclosure. We have all that education here.
Right. So you just mentioned the foreclosure prevention that we offer. Is there any other ways housing counselors can help you avoid foreclosure?
Well, we provide the education on the alternative solutions. So whether it's selling the home, whether it's giving the home back, whether it's referring them to a bankruptcy attorney for legal advice. Unfortunately, nobody can mandate the mortgage company to work with you outside of a bankruptcy filing.
Right.
So again, it comes down to, yes, we can absolutely help them navigate, help them hopefully not become a victim of a scam. And people are still being scammed with their mortgages, even after the 2008 and 2009 crisis, when all these, scams became much more out there, I guess. And now there's even more since the pandemic. It's terrible.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's crazy. So what are some common misconceptions that you may hear about housing counseling? Because I feel like with all the services, we provide, a credit counseling company provides, some people have misconceptions and they might not want our help because of what they think. So what are some common ones about housing counseling?
People think they have to be in trouble to talk to me, and that's absolutely not the case.
Right.
People again, they identify that counselor, that that title as like, oh, this person's going to tell me what to do. And it's like, no, it's very conversational. I try to keep it, really open because it is so personal. But no, absolutely. That's the biggest one. I'm like, when I'm talking to someone, well, I'm not in trouble. I don't want to go through that. I don't need to go through counseling with you. A lot of people are really private, so that could be a challenge. But I think the biggest one is, well, I'm not in trouble, so I don't need to talk to a housing counselor, and I only need a housing counselor if I'm in trouble, like if my credit's in trouble or my housing is in trouble.
Right. Yeah. And I talked to like a few credit counselors on this podcast, and they said some people are, embarrassed to start the program because they're embarrassed to have bad finances. Do you find that like some people might be embarrassed to seek housing counseling help? Like, I don't need help.
Absolutely. Or like when they are talking to you, they're barely telling you anything.
Okay.
So you
Yeah.
like really can't even figure out what's
Mhm.
going on. And then you have to kind of, just politely ask, like, okay, I feel like I'm kind of missing something, you
Mhm.
know?
Got it.
Um, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, even people that like want the help sometimes are not forthcoming. So if I could give, any piece of advice, like we want to do our best to be as honest with ourselves as we can so that we're going with a game plan.
Mhm.
And again, and it's nobody should ever feel embarrassed, and I understand we're human. So
Right.
I mean I get embarrassed. I was embarrassed my car battery died just recently because I blew up my stand-up paddleboard and then forgot to turn off the car. So silly me, burnt out the battery. So I was very embarrassed. I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's never happened in my whole life. And I was like stuck in my friend's driveway. But the point is we're all human. We all make
Right.
mistakes. In fact, I share my mistakes with my clients sometimes just so
Mhm.
that they feel comfortable
Right.
in opening up.
Yeah.
In counseling, it's not always great to be a relator, but I'll tell you, it works with
Mhm.
building that rapport because
Right.
I'm a real person too. I haven't always had excellent credit.
Yeah.
I haven't always had a stable income. I'm very
Yeah.
fortunate, with, having the opportunity here at Navicore.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so we talk again, we keep it really conversational. And that's what I think people need to know. It's a conversation. It's not about pass or fail.
Mhm. Yeah. Being honest is a great tip to give somebody who's seeking counseling help. So are there any other tips you would offer someone who's seeking counseling with us?
Yeah, just don't be afraid to reach out. And at the end of the day, if you want to help yourself, and we're here to help. I mean, that's our role. We are here to help.
Mhm.
Um, and we understand that people go through hard times and make decisions for certain reasons. So I would just say that um, be prepared to talk to somebody that's going to be interested to know about your situation and care about your well-being. I mean,
Oh,
I care about every client I talk to. I don't know them, but I want the best for everybody. And I
Mhm.
really think that that's our mission, to just provide that insight and just let these clients, these consumers, know that we're here to help them regardless of where they are, whether they're very high in their life right now or
Right.
feeling like they're at a low point.
Yeah. Well, Stacie, this was so great. I think you provided everything we need to know about housing counseling for Home Ownership Month. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. It was my pleasure.
Stacie provided such great information on all things housing counseling. This was an awesome interview for Home Ownership Month. I just want to once again remind everyone, if you're looking for a housing counselor, make sure to find one through HUD. All the counseling companies on there are certified nonprofits. You can always visit the Navicore website, which is navicoresolutions.org, to find out more about our housing counseling services. And I'll put all that information of this in the description of this podcast episode, so you guys can always get it there. As Stacie said, a housing counselor is another tool you can have when buying a house. They're great to go to for second opinions in the home buying process. I think Stacie also brought up a great point when saving for your down payment. You need to factor in all other monthly costs you have when saving. Do you want to give up going out in order to save money faster? You need to make the right decision for your budget and future financial self. Don't sacrifice saving for your retirement because you're spending more money than you can really afford to on a house. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.